Well, welcome to another live stream. Do me a favor, if you're joining the live stream and you can hear me loud and clear, put a one in the chat. Some audio issues here just a moment ago. Listen, reason we're doing this live stream today is because over the weekend there has been a huge escalation in the rhetoric in the Middle East between Lebanon and Israel, and at the moment the entire region is on the verge of a major conflict. The Middle East is about to descend into what could be a war that draws in the US, Iran, who knows, Russia, China. I mean, the consequences of this conflict will likely be far more far reaching than anyone is giving it credit. And to give you an idea of just how inflammatory the rhetoric has become, just yesterday, Saturday night, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon, put the following video out. So this is from Vin News, and they've got a video here from X that I want to play for you. The quote, though, was from Nasrallah: "In case an inclusive war is imposed on Lebanon, the resistance will fight without restraints." Now, what could that mean? You might get a clue when we watch this short video here. This is, again, Hassan Nasrallah, leader of Hezbollah. This is in a captioned video with English and Hebrew. So he's saying they're going to fight without restraint, and then the images shown in this video could give you some idea of how serious this escalation could be, because when we get to the image, I'll pause the video if I'm fast enough here. They're pointing out strategic locations in Israel, and there's one that we really need to pay attention to here, which is very alarming, and that is that it is the Dimona nuclear plant in Israel. And, you know, the idea that a nuclear reactor in Israel could be targeted, it gives you an idea of just how serious this conflict could become. There it is right there. That was the Dimona nuclear reactor that they featured in this video. And he goes on to say, whoever thinks of war against us will regret it. Quite an ominous warning there from the leader of Hezbollah. And I think it goes to show that we should be taking this very, very seriously, because, you know, if somehow Lebanon manages to target that nuclear facility in Israel, I mean, there's a potential that the whole conflict could go nuclear. Israel, a nuclear armed nation there. Also, I want to point out that this is not going to be an isolated conflict between Lebanon and Israel. I mentioned that, but we're going to go over some evidence that that is the case and talk about some of the potential fallout from this conflict breaking out. So first of all, just to recap a little bit, Hezbollah recently posted aerial footage, and I think some of those images may have been taken from that footage, of the Israeli port of Haifa. And in response to that, Israel made the claim that they are ready for an all-out war in Lebanon. The military says that plans are ready, they're in place, and that all they're waiting for is a political decision to follow through. So the logistics, everything is ready to go from the Israeli standpoint. And then, you know, following that statement, the reply from Hezbollah was the video that we just watched. However, again, it's not going to just be Hezbollah. Look at this report from Al Jazeera. So this is from today. Yemen's Houthis claim that they've launched a joint raid on Israeli ships in that port of Haifa with an Iraqi militia. So Iran has financed and armed and trained these militias throughout the region, including in Syria, Iraq, and now the Houthis, who have, you know, been sinking ships in the Red Sea recently quite successfully, sinking the bulk carrier. The name evades me, but I believe it just sank this week. They found an oil slick on the map where that ship had been. They're now coordinating with an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq. So it's not just going to be Lebanon. It's going to be all of these regional militias getting involved. Likely, Israel will need the support of the U.S. in such a conflict. And so there you see, I mean, it's not hard to put the dots together and see that we may be involved in a major conflict in the Middle East. One which is going to be tough, munitions wise, logistics wise, to support while we're simultaneously supporting a conflict in Eastern Europe. They're going to need to borrow a lot of money for what is ahead. But that's not really the fallout that I think we need to be concerned most about. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Also, this is the latest from the BBC reporting that a full scale war between Israel and Hezbollah is around the corner. Unable to back down, Israel and Hezbollah move closer to all out war. That's the headline. And the UN is now saying that this would be a catastrophe. That is probably true. And yet, still, we are seeing the world edge closer and closer to this conflict. Now, some of the immediate consequences, of course, will be skyrocketing commodity prices, oil almost certain to hit, I would say, triple digits should this conflict play out. You're not seeing that priced in yet because I suppose there's still the possibility that cooler heads could prevail, and I hope that's the case. But if you ask me, I mean, it seems pretty clear that the world is headed towards a major conflict, and right now, I think the most likely region to spark that conflict off is the Middle East. I mean, big surprise. It's been a very contentious, very volatile region for decades. We recently witnessed some serious escalations with Iran launching major airstrikes against Israel. That was a bit of a show of force. Turned out to be really not the crisis that many had assumed it could be. And yet, the possibility for this escalation really hasn't gone anywhere. And I think a lot of people have kind of breathed a sigh of relief too early. And another consequence, I believe, is going to be a rush into hard assets, gold, silver, physical assets that you can hold in your hand, safe haven assets. We saw that actually when the Iranians were launching their airstrikes on Israel last month. You saw a huge spike up in interest in precious metals over the weekend. The Pax Gold cryptocurrency, which tracks the price of gold, spiked up to over $3,000. So I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination to think that there's going to be a rush into safe haven assets should this play out. And that's why I think it's wise to position yourself with some sort of as an insurance policy against this type of disaster. Interestingly, there are also reports that Iran and the Taliban are now in talks regarding a joint action against Israel. Now, you might think, well, the Taliban, what are they going to do? But they're saying they can field thousands of soldiers in this conflict. And, they do actually have some armaments following the botched U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan recently, which left behind, tons of munitions, vehicles. I think they got some Black Hawk helicopters over there. The Taliban, say what you will about them being a ragtag force, they did manage to prevail against a U.S. military campaign of almost 2 decades. So, not to be scoffed at. And also, it's just a sign of how serious this regional escalation could become. Exactly. Yeah. Someone in the chat there says, V says, Iran and Taliban working together now, shake my head. And, well, the battle lines are being drawn, and maybe Iran and the Taliban wouldn't, under normal circumstances, be the closest of allies. I mean, there's a lot of nuances to these relationships in the Middle East. However, a conflict against Israel, I think, could have the potential to unite a lot of these disparate groups throughout the Islamic world and the Middle East, and that's a real risk that we need to consider. And, another risk that we're facing as we're sitting against this backdrop of a major regional war in the Middle East, which, who knows, could kick off, World War III. We've got problems in the Korean Peninsula. We've got problems in Eastern Europe. You've got problems in the South China Sea. You got China and the Philippines escalating things. There's a lot going on right now. We're also facing a spate of cyber attacks throughout the U.S. I'm going to go through relatively quickly a few issues regarding cyber attacks, which have been in the news this week, but this is related because I think people have this kind of misunderstanding that when World War III kicks off, everything, domestically will be kind of the same. It'll be like Ukraine or, any of these other wars that we've witnessed, but it's very likely that these cyber attacks and attacks on infrastructure within the U.S., should these conflicts really escalate, they will escalate commensurately. So one of the biggest manufacturers of forklifts this week was forced to shut down its operating systems following a cyber attack. This is Crown Equipment. They said that on Wednesday, it experienced a cyber attack and is in the process of investigating the incident. They have attributed it to an unnamed international cyber criminal organization. This is likely one of these extortion attacks where they'll launch the attack and then you got to pay a ransom to get your systems back. And we're seeing a similar problem among CDK Global. Bloomberg reporting on this earlier this week that hackers want millions in ransom to end a car dealership outage. So CDK Global is a software provider for thousands of car dealerships in North America. A ransom was demanded of tens of millions of dollars. Interestingly, Bloomberg here reports that CDK is planning on paying this ransom and that then they should be able to get systems back online. But I mean, think about this. Look, you go to a car dealership, they can't process the financing, they can't process the paperwork on a new vehicle because of a cyber attack. Now, this is inconvenient, right? This is a problem. This costs, I'm sure, millions of dollars if you add it up against all of the thousands or tens of thousands of car dealerships that are affected. Take them out of business for a period of time, and it's a big blow, but it pales in comparison to what these attacks could be like on critical infrastructure in the US. And you want to talk about a rush into safe haven assets. We saw what happened last March when there was a threat of banks collapsing. The premiums on physical bullion, the interest in physical bullion skyrocketed. That was just on a few small banks collapsing. But you got to understand that the entire digital financial system, a lot of it is just numbers, ones and zeros in the cloud, right? This is all connected to the grid. This is all very subject to cyber attack. And you can imagine ATMs stop working, can't get money out of your brokerage account, 401ks become inaccessible, the kind of panic that this is going to induce for, analog wealth, the kind that you can hold in your hand, the kind that can't just be disabled by a, foreign cyber criminal. And cyber criminals are the least of our worries because at least they have an incentive to bring things back up, right? A cyber criminal just wants to disrupt things and cause problems. They don't want to destroy things. They don't want to be destructive. They want to cause someone a headache to the point that they're willing to pay them tens of millions of dollars in ransom, right? That's their objective. But a state actor involved in warfare, well, their objective isn't financial. Their objective is simply to sow chaos. And the idea that we're going to get into World War III or even this major war in the Middle East, and that everything domestically here in the West, the grid, the water, the financial system, that all of that is going to remain completely unaffected, I think is a complete pipe dream. And so when you see these conflicts breaking out, I mean, maybe nothing will come of this. Maybe cooler heads will prevail. We'll all be better off if that is the case. But I do think it is wise to have some analog wealth outside of the financial system before a crisis like this occurs, because once it occurs, it will probably be too late to get your hands on this stuff for any kind of a reasonable price. I mean, right now we are still in a seller's market. SD Bullion channel sponsored. They've got a sale on half dollars. Although interestingly enough, they did have the rolls like this on sale. And this is something I've been focusing on stacking because I think this is going to be like the first thing to become, out of supply. They haven't made this stuff since 1964, junk silver. Whenever there's a crisis, it seems to be the first thing that dries up and premiums explode. Well, premiums are low right now, $1.79 over spot. But it's very interesting. There's been kind of a glut of supply in junk silver. This weekend, though, when SD Bullion ran this sale, they still have the $100 face bags, but they ran out of the $10 rolls. Now, I guess they could roll up some of the coins in those bags or what have you, but maybe there's nobody there to do that on a Sunday. But I did notice that their SKU for $10 rolls of junk silver was sold out. So it looks like interest, at least from that anecdotal story there, is becoming very tight. And interestingly enough, I mean, this is not a huge supply. I just tried to add 88 bags of this from SD Bullion into my shopping cart. Look, they only have 30 units available. So 30, bags of junk silver is not very much. That's like 10 full, or 3 full bags, because a full bag is $1,000 face. So they've got 30 of these bags left. That's all the junk silver they've got left with, or the half dollars at least. They have, quarters, dimes. It's just the stuff that's on sale is the half dollars, which I like to stack because fewer of them were minted than the dimes and the quarters. But this stuff, I really think, is what you want to have on hand as an emergency bullion supply in the event of some kind of a grid disruption or. Look, this is just what my imagination can come up with. I mean, probably whatever's going to really happen will be not something that we can really foresee. Life is like that. Black swan events are like that. You can't see a black swan coming, but you can see that we're very vulnerable to these events, right? We've got huge amounts of debt. We have a total digital financial system. You've got the world on the brink of war. And to top that off, I've got another story I want to cover with you. And this is a sign that even absent, global World War III conflict, you still have to worry about this sort of thing. Ecuador recently, earlier this week, was hit by a nationwide power outage. Their internet connectivity plummeted to less than 50% of what it typically is. And there's some speculation that there could be some cyber conflict aspect to this. I guess Ecuador and China have recently been at some diplomatic odds, but that seems to just be baseless speculation to me. They're reporting the official story is that this is the result of a cascading failure of the grid due to a transmission line that there was a problem with, and also they're having a big problem with power generation in Ecuador due to a drought. They typically rely a lot on hydropower, and so that's coming stressed. But look, I mean, stories like that, they kind of make you think, what would you do tomorrow if the grid went down? And then, from there, I think it's wise to just extrapolate that a little bit. What if it doesn't come back up, in a reasonable amount of time? So, yeah, you want to have some digital wealth, you want to have some gold and silver, but also, consider other aspects of preparedness: food, water, security. Think of this in an aspect where, there's no grid power. Will your alarm work? Will your water pumps work? Will the phones work? Will you have access to emergency services? What if you didn't? What would you do? Because all of that, these are things, you want to consider before you find yourself in that situation. And again, when it comes to digital wealth, when it comes to stacking gold and silver, you want to get some physical wealth out of the digital financial system. I like bars like this 100-ounce Engelhard bar or Valcombi 1-ounce gold bars, this nice 10-ounce bar. These are all good things to have. I think they're a good store of value for the long term. But when you're talking about insurance against things like grid failure or currency crisis, I do think it's wise to have some smaller denomination bullion like this junk silver, like dimes. 1-ounce rounds probably fine. Maybe some gold backs. If you're not familiar with gold backs, I've done several videos on the channel, but they're divisible gold. Each one of these notes is 1/1000th of an ounce of gold. So, things like that are probably going to be, a beneficial prep in the scenario that the ATM stop working. Of course, you want to have some cash too. Having an emergency supply of cash on hand could be really critical for the first, let's say, 72 hours after a major cyber attack or grid down failure, because that will be what people trust initially. However, I think, should the event go on longer than that, people are going to stop having faith in that paper money and they're going to want to have the real thing. And, we know that junk silver serves pretty well as a circulating currency because it did for, a very long time in this country. This actually, this was minted in 1952. So not that long ago, this stuff actually was circulating. And so it's kind of got, a track record of actually serving as money, which you can only say that for so many forms of bullion. Goldbacks too. I mean, goldbacks currently circulate in, I think, 6 states where they operate. So a bit of a track record there as well. But gold and silver, of course, stores of value that go back thousands of years. Regardless of whether we get, major conflict or not, they're not going to zero anytime soon. But if all of your wealth, and, this isn't financial advice, I'm not telling you what to do, but if all of your wealth is stored in digital forms, just numbers in the cloud somewhere, you can access them on a screen, those can go away in the blink of an eye. You've always got to understand that, and I think it would be wise to prepare accordingly. And, this week, it could be a big one for the state of geopolitics around the world. We've seen, the buildup to this, the bifurcation of the global order. We've seen the BRICS nations rising. We've seen several Middle Eastern nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE joining the BRICS. I think they're kind of showing where they're going to come down on, this conflict. Of course, it's nuanced. There's a lot to it, but one thing that's very clear from the rhetoric on both sides, Lebanon and Iran and Hezbollah on one side and Israel on the other, is that it seems like neither side is going to ratchet down the potential for hostilities anytime soon, especially when you see Hassan Nasrallah posting videos of, the Dimona nuclear reactor in Israel. If that goes down, I would not be surprised if we saw Israel pop off a tactical nuke. They have somewhere between 80 and 400 nuclear weapons. They've been constructing them with enriched uranium from the Dimona nuclear reactor since the 1960s. And it's a small space. Their back is kind of the wall there, in the sense that it's geographically a small region, and they're going to be outnumbered numerically. And so, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm trying to remain as unbiased as possible here and focus on actionable things that we can do. But really, if you're watching this things from the sidelines like I am, the thing to do is to get prepared, right? Because you and I don't have a say on whether a conflict in the Middle East breaks out. Think what you may about the ballot box and the power of democracy to decide foreign policy. But look, I'd rather maybe hope for the best, but prepare for the worst in this scenario, because I don't have a lot of faith in the political elites at this point on either side of this conflict to pursue, what would probably be in the world's best interest. There's too much at stake here. The build up to this, you might be of a mind that this is intentional, and that there's, something going on behind the scenes guiding us towards this conflict. That's possible too. But you just got to do your best to get prepared for it. So, yeah, Joe Potter says, of course it's intentional. Well, I'll leave you to decide that, whether or not this conflict is intentional, as Joe says there. Leave me a comment down below, or put it in the chat now during the live stream. If you're watching this later, leave a comment. What do you think is guiding this? I mean, why does it seem that the whole world is headed towards this major escalation, this major conflict? Is it an accident? Is there more going on behind the scenes? I'd like to know what all of you have to say. I mean, I know everybody's got kind of their pet theory here, but one thing is for sure is that it seems like a peaceful ending to this scenario that we're watching play out before our eyes is less and less likely. And I think that we could be days or weeks potentially away from this escalation. It seems to be reaching ahead right now. I mean, you're already seeing crude oil surge back above $80 earlier this week. So a bit of this is getting priced in. But when the first, attack pops off on that reactor there, or the first tactical nuke goes off somewhere either in, Eastern Europe or there in the Middle East, well, I think a lot of people are going to get a wake-up call at that point. And you've got to beat them to the punch in terms of getting prepared. Whether it's food that you need to get your hands on, or emergency supplies, or some real physical, tangible wealth that you can trust outside of the financial system before these cyber attacks kick off. And that is likely something that will kick off with this conflict. Again, you got to understand that is, I mean, it would be foolish to ignore the warnings that we've been receiving. We've seen glitches in the banking system and in the financial system on an increasing basis. Now, is that because of malicious actors? Is it because of an increased reliance on technology? And as the technology gets more complicated, we can do more and more with it, but it becomes more and more vulnerable to attack, right? It's like there was the Carrington event back in the 1800s. That was a large coronal mass ejection EMP event. And all they had were telegraphs back then. And yet that caused the telegraph lines to burst into flame. But that's a minor inconvenience, right? Compared to what would happen if, some similar event occurred today. And I know I'm kind of going far afield there talking about EMPs and things. But the point is that we've become, very technologically advanced. There's a lot we can do with our technology now. I mean, you can communicate around the world. Markets are open all the time. You can trade stocks from your cell phone. But all of those capabilities come with commensurate vulnerabilities. And, I like the term analog wealth for gold and silver because this is, relatively low tech money. It's been around for thousands of years. Coins have been around for a very long time. Now, gold actually might say are a little higher tech. 24 karat gold atomically deposited onto polymer sheets. Okay, maybe you can call that a little higher tech. But the rest of this stuff has been serving as a store of value for thousands of years. It's not going to change. And the thing about that is, there's a very limited supply of physical metal, physical bullion out there, even compared to the amount that's traded on exchanges. It's like hundreds of times less than the volume of paper that gets traded. The underlying physical that backs that up, and especially small denominations of bullion that are suitable for barter and exchange, like 1 ounce coins or junk silver, pales in comparison. There's a lot of 1,000 ounce COMEX bars, but those aren't going to do you much good in a grid down scenario unless you start hacksawing them up. I guess you can do that, but for me, I'd much rather have junk silver, especially when you can still get it relatively cheaply today. So anyway, I think this has gone on long enough. The bottom line, get prepared, because the world looks like it's about to descend into a major conflict, and that's going to be very alarming for a lot of people. They're going to want to get this stuff. There's not enough of it to get some for everybody, so get while the getting's good. Not financial advice, just telling you what I'm doing myself. And I don't think you'll be disappointed by that in the event that some catastrophe takes place. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Stay safe and happy stacking, everybody. I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.